The night was heavy, thick with the kind of silence that feels like it's watching you. Streetlights flickered in
Okay,
rhythm with my
Ray,
heartbeat.
we need to
shadows
resolve this
stretching across the
situation
driveway
immediately.
as
Please,
if
officers,
alive.
let's just calm down and
I
talk
had
this
never
through.
been nervous at my own front door until tonight. A sudden, sharp knock shattered the quiet, echoing like a warning. Through the peephole I saw them, uniformed officers, or at least they looked like it. Their badges glinted faintly, but something about them was off, wrong. The way they stood, too rigid, too rehearsed. I felt a cold sweat creep down my spine. There was no call, no warning, yet here they were, at my doorstep, staring, waiting. The air felt charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I thought about the stories you hear, the rumors of harassment, of people being treated differently, judged before a word is spoken, before a deed is done. Tonight, that fear became real. I stepped back, letting the door stay closed for just a moment longer. My wife, calm, steady, her presence a force I had always admired, walked toward me. She didn't panic. She didn't hesitate. In an instant, she was in her uniform, every inch the authority she embodied every day. And in that moment, the impossible happened. The men outside froze, a flicker of confusion and something darker crossing their faces. The night held its breath with us. The shadow of injustice met the shadow of truth, and for a heartbeat, it was as if time itself paused. This wasn't just a knock at the door. It was a test, a challenge, a moment that would reveal everything about who we were and who they thought they could be. Hit subscribe, watch till the end. The morning light filtered through the tall oak trees lining our property, painting the driveway in streaks of gold and shadow. Birds stirred reluctantly, as if unsure whether the day would be kind or cruel. Our house, a modest ranch with a wide porch, sat on a stretch of land that had belonged to my family for generations, each acre carrying a story, a memory, a silent testament to survival. From the outside, it was serene, peaceful. But beneath that calm lay a tension that most people couldn't see, an undercurrent of scrutiny that followed us wherever we went. I moved through the kitchen, the wooden floor cool beneath my feet, feeling the pulse of history in the walls. Each photograph, each artifact, told a story of perseverance. Yet the world outside our fence often told a different story, one of judgment, of suspicion, of assumptions cast before knowledge could ever reach them. The neighborhood, meticulously organized under the local homeowners association, prided itself on order, but the order had a cost. Certain eyes watched differently. Certain voices spoke louder. Certain lives were measured with a different scale entirely. My wife moved with quiet precision, handling the mundane tasks of the morning, yet carrying an air of authority that even the untrained eye could sense. Her uniform, crisp and exact, represented more than her profession. It represented power, integrity, and the respect she commanded in a world that often tried to deny it. She had faced the slights, the microaggressions, the outright hostility in her career, yet here, in our own home, a place that should have been a sanctuary, there lingered a sense of unease that refused to fade. As I stepped outside, surveying the sprawling fields, the lake glinting faintly in the distance, I felt that unease deepen. The HOA had never been subtle in their scrutiny, and I had learned to notice the signs, the cars that lingered too long at the edge of our property, the unsolicited notices pinned to our door, the whispered complaints that made their way through the tightly knit community. They were like shadows, insidious and patient, testing boundaries, waiting for the moment to strike, always measuring, always judging. And yet, the calm of the morning belied the storm to come. The birds would fall silent again. The shadows would lengthen. And that knock at the door, which I had felt but not yet heard, would bring the world rushing in with all its assumptions, all its biases, all its weight. The house, the land, the life we had built, it was about to be challenged in a way we had never anticipated. The line between safety and threat would blur, and the people who came that day would learn, in the most startling way, that authority, courage, and truth do not always wear the face they expect. The afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the lawn, turning familiar spaces into a shifting maze of uncertainty. Every rustle of the leaves, every distant engine, made my pulse quicken. The HOA's scrutiny had grown relentless over the weeks, subtle at first, A stray complaint about the fence, a murmur about the unusual gatherings at the lake. But now, the pattern had become unmistakable. They were closing in, emboldened by the quiet complicity of others, testing the boundaries of our patience, our rights, our very sense of security. I felt the weight of history pressing against me, the knowledge that even here, in a place that should have been ours, there were people waiting for a misstep, ready to weaponize assumptions. The subtle glances from passing neighbors, the deliberate mispronunciations of our names in letters, the vague threats that always seemed just on the edge of legality, they were all pieces of the same puzzle. And I knew that soon, those pieces would come together in a moment that demanded more than composure. It demanded resolve. My wife moved with quiet determination, checking locks, adjusting surveillance cameras, and ensuring every detail was in place. She had anticipated escalation, understood the patterns of intimidation and prejudice, and prepared for the worst. Yet, even with her experience, there was an unspoken tension that neither of us could ignore. The knowledge that our identities, our professions, and our very presence were being measured against some invisible standard made the air thick with foreboding. And then it happened. The knock came again, this time harder, more deliberate, a pulse of intent that carried through the walls. The shadows outside shifted as figures moved with coordinated precision, the glint of badges, or counterfeit ones, catching the fading light. Their posture, once casual, had hardened into something purposeful, something threatening. It was no longer a mere suggestion of conflict. It was a statement, a test, a challenge to our right to exist, to claim our space without explanation. Every instinct screamed caution, every fiber of training within us surged to the surface. We were ready to face threats in the field, but this was our home, our sanctuary. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were immediate, tangible, and heavy with the weight of years of prejudice and injustice. And as I watched the figures hesitate at the threshold, their uncertainty barely concealed behind forced confidence, I knew that the moment of confrontation had arrived. The world we had constructed, carefully and deliberately, would now collide with the assumptions of those who refused to see beyond their own biases. The tension was unbearable, the air thick with possibility. Possibility. The evening air had thickened into a suffocating presence, the sun retreating behind clouds that seemed to mirror the gathering tension. Every shadow stretched longer than it should, the trees bending as if to eavesdrop on the confrontation that was about to unfold. The figures at the edge of the driveway moved in precise, deliberate steps, their fake authority palpable, their uncertainty barely masked by the pretense of confidence. They had come fully prepared, or so they thought, but they had no understanding of the line they had crossed, no comprehension of the force waiting on the other side of the door. My wife stepped forward, each movement deliberate, every inch of her posture radiating command. Her uniform was more than fabric. It was a shield, a declaration, a symbol that truth and justice were not negotiable. The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation as she approached the doorway, the impostors frozen mid-step, their eyes darting, flickering between defiance and disbelief. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to suspend. The first words were unspoken. The tension spoke louder than any voice could. The men outside, trained to project authority, found themselves paralyzed by its true embodiment standing before them. The pretense of power crumbled, replaced by hesitation, confusion, and the sudden realization that their intimidation had met its match. The standoff stretched, a cinematic pause heavy with the weight of expectation, judgment, and fear. Every heartbeat in the house echoed with the rhythm of what was at stake. Our home, our family, our very identity had been challenged, and now, with one undeniable presence, the scales were tipped. The air was charged, electric, a palpable line drawn between truth and pretense, between real authority and counterfeit intimidation. And as they shifted uneasily, glances exchanged, the enormity of their miscalculation became undeniable. Then, without a word, the shift completed itself. The HOA imposters began to retreat, each step hesitant, faltering under the weight of exposure. The facade of control they had carried dissolved with every inch they drew back, leaving only the stark reality. They had underestimated us, underestimated the authority, the courage, and the unwavering dignity that stood firmly in our doorway. The very act of standing together, of asserting what was rightfully ours, shattered their composure completely. It was not just a confrontation over land or property, it was a confrontation over identity, over respect, over the assumptions that had been laid upon us for far too long. The driveway, once a boundary, became a stage where the truth played out, relentless and undeniable. The imposters had expected resistance, but they had not anticipated conviction. They had expected fear, but found resolve. And in that precise moment, the tide shifted, the narrative rewritten, the injustice confronted head-on without a single shot fired, without a word raised in anger. The house, the trees, the evening air itself seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had coiled around every corner, every shadow. Victory was not loud, it was firm, resolute, undeniable. The confrontation had reached its peak, a perfect collision of preparation, courage, and moral authority. And as the last figure disappeared from view, the weight of what had occurred settled over us, a mix of relief, vindication, and the sobering recognition that the battle was never just about property. It was about truth, dignity, and the unwavering stand against the subtle, insidious forces that sought to diminish us. The night settled over the property like a heavy velvet curtain, soft yet unyielding. The echoes of confrontation had faded, leaving behind a profound silence that felt both relieved and charged with meaning. Inside, the house hummed with the quiet aftermath, the subtle vibrations of triumph and tension intertwining. We moved through the rooms slowly, every step a reminder of the storm we had weathered and the boundaries we had defended, not just of land, but of dignity, identity, and truth. It was in that stillness that the reality of what had transpired began to crystallize. The HOA imposters, armed with their badges and pretense, had assumed authority over lives and property that they could never truly comprehend. They had underestimated courage, underestimated legitimacy, underestimated the unyielding force of justice embodied in those who refused to bow to prejudice. And in that underestimation lay the clarity of our victory, not in confrontation itself, but in the quiet, undeniable assertion of rightful authority. The air carried with it a reflection of countless injustices, subtle and overt, that we navigate in our daily lives. Every glance, every whisper, every biased assumption in society mirrors the tension of that driveway, magnified over decades. But tonight, we had stood unwavering, proving that acknowledgement of identity, recognition of authority, and the courage to act with integrity could overturn the presumptions of power. The event became more than a personal victory. It became a testament, a statement about resilience in the face of systemic bias. As the moon rose over the lake, casting silver across the water, the moment's symbolism was unmistakable. The shadows that had seemed so threatening hours before now receded into their own insignificance. The house, the land, the life we had built, anchored by history, strengthened by courage, remained unshaken. And yet, the experience left its mark, an indelible imprint of awareness, reminding us that vigilance, preparation, and moral clarity are never optional. We walked outside once more, the cool night air crisp against our skin. Every star overhead seemed to bear witness, as if the universe itself recognized the balance restored on that porch, the confrontation resolved not by force, but by rightful presence. It was a victory without fanfare, a lesson without bells or whistles, a statement delivered in silence yet heard loud and clear. In the quiet that followed, one question lingered in my mind, a question that now I leave for you, the viewer. How often do we underestimate the authority, courage, or legitimacy of those we judge prematurely? How often does bias, subtle or overt, cloud perception and dictate interaction before truth has a chance to reveal itself? And when the truth stands unflinching, when integrity and identity confront false assumptions, what becomes of those who sought to diminish it? Tonight, we learn that power wears many faces, but real authority, integrity, and resilience cannot be faked, cannot be threatened, and cannot be ignored. The HOA, their imposters, and the shadows of prejudice encountered their mirror, the undeniable force of truth, courage, and justice. And as we closed the door behind us, the resonance of that force lingered, A reminder that standing firm in one's identity and principles is not only necessary, but transformative. Hit subscribe, watch till the end. The story doesn't just end here, it echoes in every space where assumptions confront reality, in every life where courage faces prejudice. This night, this confrontation, serves as a testament that dignity is defended not by the fear of others, but by the unwavering embrace of truth.